All right, guys, what's going on? Welcome back to the Everything Eligible podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be looking at the 2023 Gator Bowl being contested on Friday, December 29th, live from Jacksonville, Florida, at Everbank Stadium. Clemson, 4-point favorites, 12 p.m. Eastern Time on ESPN. Looking at these offenses for Clemson, Garrett Riley comes over and tries to implement his new, air raid attack. And, at spurts it worked, and for the most part, though, it was, an above-average unit. Team still trying to get back on track. Cade Klubnik, a guy who at times you really hurt his football team of his decision-making. But this passing attack, I thought, was solid at times for the limited, amount of talent. 215 yards per game for Klubnik, 19 touchdowns, 8 picks. Also added 4 more, about 200 on the ground. And we speak about the receiving core. It's not all that great, especially Bo Collins now transferring. Tyler Brown, that was a very pleasant surprise. 51 grabs, 519, 4 touchdowns, an impressive pass catcher there. Jake Brinkstall at tight end is a reliable candidate. Good for 10 yards per catch with 5 scores as well. Troy Stiletto, Adam Randall, other guys who saw the ball a little bit this season. What do you think this passing attack's going to be able to do in the season finale, Nick? You think Klubnik's going to be in for a pretty good game, or do you think it'll be a disappointment down in Jacksonville?
We were hoping to see a lot out of this passing attack with Garrett Riley taking over as the offensive play caller for this team. Klubnik, I think, is still a fantastic quarterback. Definitely a shaky year at times, 63% comp rate, 2,500 yards, 19 touchdowns, 8 picks. Not a terrible stats for the young man, 29.9 points per game for this offense, 4.46 yards per attempt, and 5.3 yards per play. I was a little disappointed in this offense. I thought this passing attack could be better. I think they need to recruit some more talented weapons at wide receiver. We've talked about this. Having no Bo Collins is certainly a disappointing loss for Klubnik in this game. Tyler Brown, though, is a solid wide receiver, 519, 10.2, and 4 scores. Jake Brenning still 407, 9.9, and 5 scores. Troy Stiletto, 279, and a score for him. Will Shipley can be involved in the passing game as well. He has 2 receiving touchdowns and 235 in addition to what he's been able to do on the ground. I think this offense can have success in this game against this Kentucky secondary, but I think they've been just disappointing this year. You wanted to see more of them. 225 pass yards per game is not a terrible number, but it's also a little disappointing for this Clemson team.
Good thing for them is this rushing attack was actually much better than we probably originally expected. On the stat sheet, only 3 yards per game better this season, but they're still very efficient. Both backs are expected to get to go in this one. Phil Maffa, Will Shipley, very identical numbers. They combined for 14 touchdowns, over 5 yards per touch for each, 800 plus yards for them. They both put up a little over 70 yards per contest. This is a nice 1-2 punch here. What do you think of this part of this offense, Nick? They certainly love to ride behind these guys, and in certain times they really were splendid. They're coming off 3 straight games of 200 plus rushing yards. Much like last year to close the regular season, they put up, an abundance of rushing yards on the ground. Seems to be a yearly tradition here where they just get things going at the back half of the season when it comes to running the football.
These are 2 really solid backs going back and forth and making good progress on the ground. 894 for Phil Maffa, good numbers, 5.3 yards per carry, 9 scores. Shipley 789, 5.1 and 5 scores. Klubnik's run a few rushing touchdowns himself as well. So I think they have good balance on this rushing attack. It's important for this team to have balance on the ground. You want to make sure you can move the ball at an efficient rate. I like what I've seen so far. These are a nice 1-2 punch here with these backs. And like I said, Shipley can be involved in the passing game as well. He has that nice dual threat ability.
Yeah, this offensive line, pretty average unit. Thought Blake Miller at right tackle was a pleasant surprise for him. Bill Putnam, center, looking to go out with a victory. Tristan Lee, the left tackle, certainly an above average season, I guess you could say. Looking at the Kentucky offense, a unit that we really expected to kind of kick in the high gear this year with the return of Liam Cohen. They kind of reshuffled this O-line, added some really nice talents over the past couple seasons. And Devin Leary, 23 touchdowns, 10 picks, 56% completion rating, 203 passing yards per game. This is a guy week after week kept saying I need to play better football. Well, he just never did, Nick. He really just never seemed to find that level he had at NC State in the past. And this is a player coming off some really, pitiful performances. They are 2-2 over the last 4. But they went on a losing streak in the middle of the season against tougher opponents, and this guy just wasn't really helping them out. In the Tennessee game, he looked good, but he had less than 130 yards in games against Georgia and Missouri. About $150 against Alabama. In the loss to South Carolina, only had 171. Did have 3 touchdowns against Louisville, still only completed 50% for 206. This is a quarterback that really has not elevated the offense like we thought. Only 1 300-yard game since September, and that was against the Volunteers. Other than that, though, he barely – actually, I'm going to go ahead and correct myself. Only 2 games since September of 200-plus passing. That's awful.
We thought that Mark Stoops and company got a bit of a coup when they grabbed Devin Leary out of the portal. I thought he could really work on this offense and be a good piece to replace Will Levis, who had jumped on to the NFL. I thought Leary could be better than Levis was, and I've been very disappointed with Leary at this point in the season. 56% comp rate, 2,400 yards, 23 touchdowns, 10 picks. 10 picks, not a good number. Certainly a disappointing figure for this offense. I thought Leary had an opportunity to be a solid player for this team. 4.97 yards per attempt on the ground, 6 yards per play, and 28.6 points per game. So his offense was still scoring a fair amount at the 28.6 points per game mark. 200 passing yards per game, though, is disappointing. The wide receiving room has some talented pieces, in my opinion, that can get the job done. But overall, I've been just kind of disappointed with this offense.
Now you look at the running game. Obviously, they're going to be about Ray Davis, who was great for them. You'll see what they do. Ramon Jefferson, I'm a big fan of his talent. I just think this is an opportunity for him to showcase that if he gets a bulk of the touches. Demi Sumo also came from NC State, 20 touches for him. And then fourth leading rusher Jatan McClain. He is in the portal, so it looks like they're going to be down to some veterans that haven't seen the ball this much at all this season. The receiving core looks like everyone's going to be a full go here too, and these guys are great. Dane Key, Tavion Robinson, he's versatile. Barry and Brown has plenty of speed. These guys all 439 yards or more, at least 3 touchdowns each. 37 receptions or more for all of them. Obviously, Ray Davis, losing him, he's a big playmaker. He had 7 touchdowns as a pass catcher as well, along with 13 rushing. So that missing production is going to be, very tough, especially in this bowl game, Nick. Some great receivers here, though. Even though Leary's kind of a joke of a quarterback, he still has plenty of guys to work with.
This is an offense that has some solid players, top to bottom. I think there are some good players for this team. I do like what this wide receiving core has. When I look at Dane Key, I think he's a good player. 553, 14.6, and 5 scores. Tavion Robinson, 507, 13.7, and 4 scores. Similar player to Wan'Dale Robinson, who's now in the NFL playing for the Giants. A good kind of gadget, do-it-all type of player. I really like what I've seen of Tavion Robinson. I'm a big fan of his. I love him a lot. This Kentucky year, I think he's been great on the film. Brayon Brown is another solid player, 439 and 3 scores. I thought he was good when they used him in the passing as well on the ground. And then obviously Ray Davis being out for this game is a big blow because he has 7 receiving touchdowns and 317. So they're going to have to find ways to step up in the passing attack. They do have the top receivers, though, right? Having Robinson and Key are good players to return. I think both of them are very talented and exciting players to watch.
You move to the defenses for Clemson. This was still a stout side of the ball for them, even though the offense certainly had some struggles. And the defense wasn't perfect by any means. This is still a great defense. Jeremiah Trotter, Inju Makamba, first and third leading tacklers. They're not going to be playing. One to the draft, the other one transferring to Texas. Barrett Carter, he's going to be playing in this game, though. Still an elite linebacker, 59 tackles, 9 TFL for him. Tyler Davis, Ruka Horo, some senior defensive linemen. They appear to be playing in this game. They've accepted invites to the Senior Bowl. This run defense, they struggled in the win against North Carolina. Miami kind of tore them up a bit, and then Notre Dame early on in that game was able to do some damage. Other than that, though, this run defense is incredibly sound. I mean, they held Florida State to only 22 yards rushing. Granted, that was back in September. They just held, South Carolina and Georgia Tech well in check. NC State, their ground game isn't anything special. Held them to under 70 yards. So this run defense can still be very crushing, and it starts with some of those guys that just named off, Nick. And, of course, you got guys like DeMonte Carpate. And then, TJ Parker really stepped up this year. Clemson's ability to just insert young players and for them to be able to, climb into these roles. And Kobe McLeod, a linebacker, for example. It's pretty impressive what they've done. Peter was another one who hasn't had great production this year, but still made an impact. Plenty of versatility here. Even though they're missing a few players, I think they're going to be just fine.
Certainly a lot of versatility for this team. Good rotational pieces. I think Clemson's been recruiting very well on the defensive side of the ball. Yes, losing Trotter and Makamba is a big blow. Makamba, a great piece in the secondary. Trotter, a great linebacker, quarterback of the defense. But Carter can step up and be that quarterback he needs to be. 59 total tackles, 9 tackles for loss, 3 sacks for him, 2 pass breakups. Good numbers there. TJ Parker, 30 total tackles, 11 tackles for loss, 5 sacks for him. Good numbers. Tyler Davis, 31 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss. Rook Arojo, 25 total tackles, 8 tackles for loss, 5 sacks. Wade Woods, another solid player for this team. I like what I've seen at him. 24 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks, 2 picks. Xavier Thomas, 24 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks for him. Peter Woods, 5-star true freshman. I was very high on him coming out of Thompson High School in Alabama. I saw him play in high school. A very talented 5-star, 22 total tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss. Moscow, Carhart, McLeod all have good numbers as well. They all have multiple tackles for loss and some solid tackle numbers. So the production is certainly deep down on this depth chart. This is a very physical defense so far this season for Clemson. I like what I've seen. I've been very impressed with them.
Yeah, Wade Woodhouse will probably step into a role this year. I think they're trying to maintain that red shirt on Kobe. And I do want to clarify, Peter Woods has actually been a great run defender this year. Not exactly on the stat sheet, though. You look into the secondary, of course, McCummon not playing, a guy that wasn't exactly the player we thought he would be. Of course, when Venables departed, kind of shook things up a little bit. Wes Goodwin, though, still has a great secondary. R.J. Mickens, a freshman, and Khalil Barnes has really stepped up for them. I believe Nate Wiggins is going to the draft, so he's not going to be playing in this one. So the cornerback positions are certainly going to be something to watch. Sheridan Jones, he's really been beat up the last couple of weeks. So you certainly want to monitor what's going to go on at corner. Toriano Pride, he transferred out as well. So maybe depth is going to be a bit challenging here in this one, but I think this front seven is well equipped to handle any inefficiencies they may have in the back end.
Secondary is a bit of an issue for this team right now, like you said, with injuries, opt-outs, things like that. Mickens is a good player, 41 total tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 3 pass breakups for him. Khalil Barnes is a good player as well, 31 total tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 interceptions, 6 pass breakups. Good production there. This defense overall, I was impressed with this unit, 19.9 points per game, 3.75 yards per attempt on the ground, 4.48 yards per play. Solid numbers across the board, 14 interceptions to 11 passing touchdowns given up. That's a pretty incredible thing to look at there. They're positive in the interceptions to touchdowns ratio. I've been really impressed with this team. It is disappointing they're missing a lot of their secondary pieces, so that is something to note if you're looking at this game. But outside of that, this defense is phenomenal.
Secondary's elite, 52.5% completion rating. They've only given up 200 yards 3 times this year, to over 250 only once. That was the FSU, was able to spark some big plays all the way back in September. 162 yards per game, elite secondary for them. You look at the Kentucky defense, a unit that I felt would be able to lead them to some contention in this conference. They give up 25 points per game. They certainly are, a little impressive against the run, though. 113 yards per game allowed, less than 3.5 yards per attempt. Tennessee was able to kind of a field day with them. Alabama, they had some good success. Other than that, though, they really held mostly everybody in check. In Georgia, they put up a $173 on them. They're not completely getting gashed by any means. Looked solid against Jordan as well. I'm under the impression everyone's going to be playing here for them. They have some great linebackers. Derek Jackson, Trevin Wallace. These guys are great. Deon Walker has some great size up front. You got J.J. Weaver coming off the edge. Octavius Oxendine didn't exactly have the greatest season like we envisioned, but this is still, Josiah Hayes as well. A really good part of this defense. Pretty impressed with their linebackers. Brad White has himself a nice unit yet again. And again, just giving up some more points than we probably envisioned. But I think if the offense was a little bit better, this defense probably could have helped them out. Maybe not in the games against Georgia or Bama. It's still a completely different animal to tackle. Tennessee as well, where they throttle them with balance. But for this respective game against Clemson, where the passing attack certainly wavers from time to time, the run game is good, but it's certainly something they could probably bow up against.
I think this is certainly a unit that has some solid pieces. They've had good production at times. I do like what I've seen. Some other players, though, have not really lived up to expectations. But Eric Jackson at linebacker, 81 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions, 3 pass breakups. Kind of a do-it-all player there for Octavius Oxendine. His production was disappointing this year. 19 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. Still a big physical player on that defensive line coming off that edge. They move him around if they need to. J.J. Weaver is another solid piece for this team. I do like what I've seen out of him. I think he's a good leader, 40 total tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 5 sacks for him. Good production there. I think there's a decent amount of players here. Trevin Wallace as well is another good leader, 69 total tackles, 7.5 tackles for loss, 4.5 sacks. So they have nice production. This is a good unit that gets in the backfield and causes some nice tackles for loss when they get the opportunity to do so. 24.8 points per game, 3.33 yards per attempt on the ground, and 5.29 yards per play this defense is giving up.
Secondary is a pretty solid unit. 20 touchdowns allowed, 238 yards per game, 67% completion rating. Oh, that's a big problem. They have been able to snag 10 interceptions. They have some really good players. Maxwell Harrison having a phenomenal year. 5 interceptions from him, 6 pass breakups, an elite cover corner this season. Of course, Derek Jackson's a great coverage linebacker for them. They certainly have Andrew Phillips as well. I think he's going to be playing in this game. Joe Hardaway played a good bit this season. Of course, Jalen Geiger, he's transferring, didn't play that much this year. So the secondary is probably not going to be, in par of what you probably think. Zion Childress, good safety for them. A nice solid back end overall. This unit is probably going to struggle a little bit, at least probably with covering Tyler Brown. I think giving up first downs, especially the Brinkstool at tight end. It's going to be an interesting matchup with him and the backers. I don't think they're going to get absolutely throttled, but I certainly think they're probably going to be on par with what they give up. And that's about 250 yards per game.
Max Hairstain's a good player in the secondary, 64 total tackles, 5 interceptions, 6 pass breakups from him. Ty Bryant, the true freshman, 37 total tackles and a pass breakup. He had a tough time at times at free safety, but I think he's a good player. Andrew Phillips, another solid player for this team, 4 pass breakups, 44 total tackles for him. I think they will struggle at times in this game, but I think this is a unit that's not too bad. 238 per game in the air is not an incredibly low number, but it's still not a terrible number. Under 250, I think is respectable for this Kentucky team.
Final thoughts and the prediction for Clemson. You want to attack that secondary and pressure Devin Leary, who's prone to make mistakes while under pressure. Limit that ground game if you're Kentucky. Set up some easy completions. I'm going to pick this to be a little bit closer of a game. The spread, for some reason, is only 4, 27-19 for me. I just don't think that Kentucky's really going to be able to generate much. I certainly think this defense is well equipped to hold up in this specific matchup, though. I think that's why it's going to be a little bit closer, may even be lower scoring. But I think the Tigers are going to win this one. They're certainly amped up for these bowl games. I don't think they're going to have any issue covering up Leary. I think Klubnik, he's too talented of a quarterback not to take advantage of some of the things that's going to be given to him and these running backs. They'll find ways to get him incorporated, so it won't be completely shut down. They just give up way too many completions, does Kentucky. I think that's going to be a problem here. And Leary, I think, is probably going to make too many mistakes because he's really been prone to do that. So I'm going to take Clemson by 8, and it could be more. It could also be lower scoring.
I'm all over this one with you as well. I think Clemson will win this game. I have a bit wider of a margin of 32-17. I think Clemson just has too much talent on both sides of the ball here. I know they got some tough opt-outs in 2 leaders in McCumber and Trotter, but overall I like that defense a lot to keep pressure on Leary, like you said, and make him make mistakes, limit the ground attack, which has been really strong for Kentucky. They're also missing some of their talented players. I do think it's worth watching because there are some talented wide receivers who I think can be potential, maybe even potential NFL sleepers in the future in Robinson and the other leader on this team in Key. I think both of them are very fun to watch. 2 talented wide receivers for this team. I think if Kentucky control the game on the ground and prevent Maffa and Shipley from having good days, they could be very competitive. But I just think the 2 backs will have a great day. Klubnik will be comfortable in the pocket, make no mistakes, and lead Clemson to a nice bowl win in the Gator Bowl down in Jacksonville. They should have great fan support coming down from Clemson. It's a good matchup on the 29th, a game worth watching.
For today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.